Hi. I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking. And this time I've been thinking about worries. So the reason I've been thinking about worries is because I know that for me, worries can take away some of my enjoyment of the nice things that are happening in my life, and that's annoying. So I want to know if there's anything that I can do to ease those worries or make them go away altogether. So if you've seen my previous videos, you might know that I've been spending time recently thinking about fear and facing my fears. And that got me wondering if fear and worry are part of the same thing. So I've already been making some progress with facing my fears, but despite that, I find that I still have some worries. So I'm thinking maybe fear and worry are not the same thing. So I'm hoping that if I spend some time thinking about worries in the same way that I did for fears, I might come to understand it a bit more, and hopefully find out if there's anything that I can do differently to get rid of my worries, and be able to enjoy the nice things in my life without thinking about what could go wrong in the future. So when I think about worries, I can see that I don't worry about everything. So I think that might be telling me that worrying is probably a choice, maybe even a habit. So hopefully there is a way to make better choices or to break those habits, to free ourselves from worrying. So I think it's worth having a closer look to see what we can find out. So firstly, I wanted to see if the definitions of fear and worry indicate whether or not they're the same thing. I did a bit of reading around, and the general consensus seems clear that they're not the same thing. So I'm quite pleased about that because it maybe explains why tackling my fears hasn't helped with some of my worries. And so hopefully there is something different that I can do to work on my worries. So it seems the reason that fear and worry are different is because worry is more in the mind and is connected to thinking about what might happen, whereas fear is more emotional and can be a physical response to a threat that is really happening or perceived to be happening in the present. So they definitely sound quite different, but I still feel a bit confused about it. I think if I've understood it correctly, it sounds like it would be possible to worry about fear, but not to fear having worries. So say we're on an imaginary train journey. I might be worried that if the train is late, I won't arrive in time for my appointment. And if on the same train, some of the other passengers are getting angry, I might fear for my safety if I'm sitting near to them. So I can see that the strategies for dealing with those two scenarios would probably be quite different. I can't control whether or not the train is on time, so maybe I'd need to work on sort of mentally trying to accept the situation. Whereas for the angry passenger situation, it would probably be a good idea to move away to a safe distance and then maybe take some deep breaths to try and calm down. So maybe I'm starting to understand the difference, that if you're experiencing fears, you need to take action, whereas if you're experiencing worry, you need to look at possibly reframing negative thoughts and practicing acceptance. So maybe now I feel clearer about what the difference between fear and worry is. We can dig in a bit deeper into what exactly is happening when we have worries, and what we can do about it. So I mentioned before that I do find myself worrying about things. I don't tend to talk much about those worries. I guess I just assume that everybody worries to a certain extent, and probably they do. But it also seems a bit of a gloomy subject, so that puts me off too. I suppose it is a bit of a gloomy subject because it involves your imagination coming up with scenarios that aren't nice. You know, and my brain seems quite good at that, and sometimes I think my imagination doesn't like me very much at all, because it seems to like making sure that I've thought about what's the worst that could happen. You know, I wonder why it doesn't seem quite so inclined to test out what's the best that could happen. I mean, maybe in some ways, you know, it might be helpful to test out the bad scenarios in our minds, because it could help to encourage us to be prepared for anything. But spending time worrying about things that will probably never happen seems mostly like a waste of energy. So I think on balance, I'd rather not do it, you know, if I can help it, and especially if I can work out, you know, exactly when it is or isn't helpful. So on that subject of helpful or not helpful, I sometimes have an annoying thought pop up into my head, that if I do stop worrying about something, it will serve me right when it happens and I'm not ready for it. You know, that's how mean my brain is at times. You know, I do try to believe that that isn't true, and that worrying doesn't help. But I do, you know, wrestle with the idea that maybe those thoughts actually are there to be helpful and I shouldn't ignore them. You know, if I could find a way to separate the potentially helpful worries from definitely unhelpful worries, I think it would be a much better approach. But, you know, is that even possible? So when I was thinking more broadly about worries, it did seem that the further into the future the worry was, the less I could seem to take anything useful from it. So maybe that's a good place to start. You know, could we say that worries about things happening in the next week, say, are helpful, but anything further ahead is unhelpful? You know, I think it probably makes sense that the further into the future we're imagining things, the less likely we are to be right about them. You know, maybe if we try testing that out with a few examples, you know, with some of my current worries. So, I'm worried about how I'll get all my work done this week after taking a couple of days off. So that's definitely a worry about this current week. And it seems like it's probably a helpful worry because I do need to figure out a plan for how I'll tackle it. So the next one I'm worried about is how much time I'm spending on making my videos and whether I'll be able to keep up with it. That's also a situation from my current week, and it does seem a helpful worry because I do need to figure out how to come up with a better system to fit it all in. So the next thing I'm worried about is how I'll feel when my children move out of the family home. So that's a worry for the future. And there isn't really anything useful I can do about it right now. So it seems like maybe an unhelpful worry. So the next thing I'm worried about is the health of people that I care about and the possibility that it could get worse in the future. So that's also a worry for the future that I can't really do anything about now. So again, that seems like an unhelpful worry. And the last example for now is that I'm worried about whether I've picked the right holiday for the family next year. Have I picked the right dates? Will everyone be okay and able to go, or will it be a disaster and a waste of money? So that's another worry about the future, about decisions I've already made. So again, that seems like an unhelpful worry. So I can see from all of those that really I just want things to turn out well, and so that seems like a good thing. But if it's that desire for everything to turn out well that's fueling all my worries, then maybe it might not be such a good thing after all. So I can also see from those examples that the further into the future my mind goes and the more unknown the scenarios, the more pointless the worries seem to become. Whereas for the worries in the immediate future, I can feel my brain already starting to work on what I need to do to solve them. So they feel much more useful. So I'm starting to think that it might be helpful to reframe the worries for the immediate future as problems to be solved, and maybe worries for the more distant future as reminders of things that are important to me. So if I relate that back to the worries I already mentioned, my worry about the work tasks could become a problem statement, like review all my work tasks so that I can move some things into next week. And my worry about making videos could become a problem statement, like create a system for making my videos that is efficient and can fit into the time I have available. And then my longer term worries could become reminders of things that are important to me. So something like, I'm lucky to have children and to enjoy having them at home with me. Or I'm lucky to have people in my life that I care about and I hope they stay healthy. Or I'm lucky to have a holiday planned for next year and I hope I've picked a good one. So working through those examples in that way, I can't help but be reminded of the work I did on happiness and the video I made. And so I'm wondering if the answers I found there are also part of the solution here. Because two of the main takeaways from that video were to make a habit of being grateful and being hopeful. And I can see a connection here with worrying about things for the future. You know, it seems like my longer term worries start from the things that I'm most grateful for and don't want to lose. And so I suppose that makes perfect sense, really. You know, I'm grateful that I have a family that I care about, and I hope we'll all be okay in the future. I'm grateful that I've been able to book a holiday for next year, and I hope that I've made some good decisions and that we'll have a great time. So it feels really helpful to me to reframe my worries in that way. So I'm going to try and apply that thinking to any other worries that come into my mind, and I'll be interested to see if it works with those too. So my plan for the future will be to first decide whether the worry is a short-term or a long-term one. And by that, I mean whether the worry is for something now or for something in the future. You know, if it's a short-term worry, I'll change it into a problem statement that my brain can get to work on. And if it's a long-term worry, I'll create a grateful and hopeful statement that I can add to my happiness list, so that I can remember that the worry is just a reminder of what's important to me and that I don't need to do anything else with it other than be grateful and be hopeful about it. You know, and if this works, I really think, you know, we've managed to do something positive with the worries. You know, and it's amazing to think that they could actually help us to find extra happiness in the end. You know, I was hoping to find something positive from this, but I didn't expect it to look as good as that. You know, I'm definitely going to give this a try, and, you know, and I hope that other people will too, and, you know, and let me know how it goes. You know, I think just keeping it simple, you know, pick a few worries that you currently have, categorise them into short-term and long-term, create a problem statement for the short-term ones, and create a grateful and hopeful statement for the long-term ones, and see if you feel different about them. You know, reframing how you look at things can be really powerful, especially for things like worries that are really all in the mind anyway. So maybe we really can make them go away. And if your future worries do turn out to be real, you can take comfort from the fact that at some point they'll become short-term worries, and at that stage you can come up with a plan to tackle them. And that means that you can free yourself from trying to solve them in advance. So getting back to the original question, are fears and worries part of the same thing? And can anything be done to stop worries from spoiling your enjoyment of life? So I think the answers are no, fears and worries are not the same thing, so they do need a different approach. And yes, there are things that we can do to help stop worries from spoiling our enjoyment of life. In fact, worries may even be able to enhance our enjoyment of life if we can frame them in a helpful way. So that's exciting. So I hope you've taken something useful from the video. I think that's all for this time. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next time. Bye.